Today's scripture from the Old Testament witness begins a story, or continues a story, I should say, that is couched in the best and worst of human drama. On the one hand, this whole book of Joshua is a war story. And war stories almost always convey both humanity's better angels, like valor and bravery and banding together against a common enemy, but war stories also bring into light humanity's darkest demons, like savagery and cruelty and insane destruction. Among my favorite Christian writers and theologians is a man by the name of Frederick Buechner, who casts this take on Joshua's emerging leadership. He says Moses was a hard act to follow. After the tired old man breathed his last on the slopes of Mount Pisgah, overlooking the promised land which he never quite made it to, the job of leading the Israelites on in fell to Joshua. Since the promised land was inhabited by a group of native Canaanite tribes who weren't about to give up without an argument, the result was years of war at its crudest and most savage. And in the eyes of Joshua and his people, it wasn't just any old war. It was a holy war. It was Yahweh they were fighting for. Because the land they were out to get, come hell or high water, was the land that centuries before, in Abraham's time, Yahweh had promised them so they could settle down in it and become a great nation in it and a blessing to all nations in it. But prisoners weren't supposed to be taken and spoils were not supposed to be divided because Yahweh, their God, was the one they all belonged to. Ai, Jericho, Gibeon, cities fell like clay pigeons at Joshua's feet, and everything that would burn was put to the torch, and everything that wouldn't burn, like men, women, and children, was put to the sword. Holy wars, says Buechner, are the unholiest kind. The battle of Gibeon was one of the worst parts of it. 5 Amorite kings were drawn up against the Israelites, and Joshua launched his attack just before dawn. His men leapt out of the mist with a terrible light in their eyes. There was a wild storm with hailstones as big as hand grenades. The Amorites panicked, and the slaughter was on. It was a long, bloody massacre. And in order to have enough daylight to finish it by, Joshua fixed the sun with his stern military gaze and gave it his orders. "Sun, thou stand still at Gibeon," he said, as recorded in Joshua 10:12. And because Joshua was in command of the operation, and because Yahweh was in command through him, the sun snapped to attention and kept shining till the job was done. It was the longest day on record, and when it was finally over, the ground was strewn with the dead, and the mutilated bodies of the 5 Amorite kings were hanging from the 5 trees. This is the Bible. With one exception, there was nothing that Joshua hadn't been able to see in the prolonged, relentless light the sun had supplied him. The one exception was that the God he was fighting for was the God of the Amorites too, whether they realized it or not. But Yahweh saw that and brooded over it, and more than 1,000 years later, through the mouth of the one called the Anointed One, we hear these words, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." Jesus, Matthew 5:4. And then Jesus blesses the peacemakers, so that even without any extra sunshine, everybody would be able to see that peace is always better than even the holiest of wars. Especially the kind of peace that not even a holy terror like Joshua can either give or take away. Leave it to Jesus to spoil the victory celebration by reminding us that in war, there are no real winners. What good is it to gain the whole world if in the end you lose your soul? Said Jesus. Now this was a 40-year plus project, this march toward a new life and a new land for the Israelite people. And we know that the people along the way faced many hardships and struggles and challenges. And their patience time and again had run out, and their confidence in their leadership had withered, and their willingness to continue on the journey together, working together toward the goal, had been greatly tested, and their bond as a people had been stretched almost to a breaking point, and their faith in Yahweh their God and their resolve to hold to the covenant God had made with them had been almost fractured. But now, in our story today, they've made it. They've made it to the promised land. Mission accomplished. But wait, somebody else is already there. Somebody else is claiming the same address. Somebody else is holding deed to the property. The people of God arrive in the promised land, and when they come, we find out they're greeted not as explorers discovering a new world, but as illegals crossing the border. And the fight is on. And for many chapters through the beginning books of the Old Testament, we hear about that fight. And we shift centuries upon centuries ahead in history to our own time. And in that part of the world, what's called Holy Land for the world's three major religions, in that part of the world, the fight is still literally on. But before the arms race begins and the weapons of violence and conquest come out, the people of God, on their last leg of the journey into the promised land, crossing the River Jordan, are given instructions to allow the Ark of the Covenant to go before them. What is the Ark of the Covenant? It's a decorated box that legend and history says contains the tablets Moses had received on Mount Sinai. In the box are the stones upon which God's agreement with his people had been chiseled. It's what we know as the Ten Commandments. And God said, raise up that box containing that agreement so that everyone can see it as they cross the river to the place that holds their dreams. Well, I mean, a decorated box is all well and good, but what's it going to do to help them win the fight ahead? It's not going to take down those who we see as being in our way of claiming what is rightly ours to own and possess. No box, however pretty or however holy, ever won a battle against swords or guns or bombs. Let's get real, folks. Take up your real arms. We have a right to have those arms. Why is God so focused on keeping their eye on the box, following the box? Well, when God was forming his people into a people, God had the audacity to say to them, if you are mine, this is who you are. You are a people who will honor the unity of all humankind. For I am one God over all the world. I'm not some little g god on equal footing with all those other man-made little g gods filling the world with their false hopes. I'm the one big G God, and don't forget it. Which means you don't own me. I am over all the world. I am your God, yes, but I'm just as much the God of all those others who you call outcasts or illegals or immigrants or enemies. God said to them on those tablets, if you are my people, this is who you are. You don't lie. You don't lie about your brother or sister. You don't steal from your neighbor. You don't cheat on those who have promised to love and care for you. You don't dishonor those who have raised you up and help get you where you are. As what was written on those tablets over time was fleshed out, God's expectations of who they are, who His people are to be, came to include things like they are a people who will make sure that the vulnerable in the community, like the widow and the orphan and the homeless, will be taken care of. He said to them, you are the kind of people who are to welcome strangers and to look out for the immigrant. God says to them, that's who you are. Remember who you are. Remember where you came from. You know, it's easy. It's so easy sometimes when we get to our promised lands and we proclaim our mission accomplished. It is easy for us to forget who we are and where we came from and who got us here. My favorite preacher, Fred Craddock, says that God said to His people, remember, you are liberated slaves. And I want you to remember it because when you're in a land of your own, there will be strangers who will come. There will be people that you can take advantage of because they don't know the language, or they don't have a home, or they don't have an education. Oh, you can work them for practically nothing. You can really take them for all they're worth. No, when a stranger comes among you, remember who you are. Remember you were once a stranger in Egypt. And God said to them, I want you to remember that I'm the one who gave you food, bread from heaven, and water for the journey, all the way through the wilderness to that promised land. I fed you. I gave you birth. I nurtured you. I nursed you. I gave you love. I gave you safety. Don't forget that. I gave you water from a rock. I gave you manna from heaven. I fed you every day. Don't forget that. The time will come, God said, that you'll be in a land. You'll have a nice home. But don't forget where you came from and who brought you here. That's why He told them to keep their eyes on that decorated box. I can't think of any message more important for us to hear right now. Before we climb up on our high horses, whatever those high horses may be, we need to remember who we are and where we came from, and who got us here. I hope that when we cast our ballots, or if we've already cast our ballots for this upcoming election, I hope we will remember as Americans who we are. What are our founding values? All people are created equal. All should have access to life and liberty and the pursuit of their dreams. I hope we will remember that we are the people who welcome the tired and the poor and the huddled masses longing for a better life for themselves and their families, longing to be free. We don't put immigrant children in cages and separate them from their parents. That's not who we are. I hope that if you are among those of us who will have a nice bed to sleep in tonight, in a comfortable house, in a quiet neighborhood, I hope we all can remember how we got there. Did we start out life with lots of advantages? Did we have an army of supporters helping us and cheering us along the way? Did we get some seemingly lucky breaks that propelled us forward in our journey? One of the things I love the most about this church, and I miss so incredibly much right now, is being able to look out at the faces in our congregation and see the common threads which hold us together. To see out there folks who came into this world with advantages that have often put us in the front of the line. But see some of those folks bowing at the altar, with those who started the race 10 paces behind and haven't seemed to catch a break along the way. And we're all here at this altar. All of us. Because we need God's grace. Because we have forgotten who we are and where we came from and what we can be. And we need God's grace. I know it seems completely counterintuitive, totally backwards. But God says the first two weapons in our arsenal, the most important weapons for us to take into any battle that we wage, the two most important weapons are humility and gratitude. Humility. Don't forget who we are. And gratitude. And who got us here. Every day, we give thanks. I hope we give thanks. Let's pray together. Lord, some of us are looking out, still longing for our promised land, and others of us may feel as if we were planted there from the beginning. But I hope we all can see that who we are and where we are is not of our own making. It's pure gift. And because it's pure gift, you call us, you place on us an obligation. Not an option, an obligation. To reach out to the stranger and welcome them. To the lost, that they might feel found. To the lonely, that they might know we are with them. To the afraid, that they might find confidence. To the sick, that they might enjoy healing. Keep our eyes and our ears and our hearts ever open. Flood them with your compassion. This is our prayer. In the name of Christ. Amen.